All right, today we have another episode from the archives with one of my incredible guests. Enjoy. All right, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to help trauma therapists be their incredible selves, to be human, to be real, not just a clinician. I'm a big believer in who we are is more important than what we know. And this requires cultivating authenticity, genuineness, and vulnerability, and that requires intention. You can learn more about my courses and workshops by going to thetraumatherapistproject.com. That's thetraumatherapistproject.com. Let's get started. All right, guys, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. Super excited today to introduce my guest, David Carr. David, welcome.
Thank you, Guy. I'm a big fan, and I love your podcast. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Appreciate it. David's written an exposé titled We Can Overcome an American Trauma. As a boy, David heard the stories of what his father endured as a young boy. Fists appearing like unexpected rain, kicks in the side, and nails in his skin. But David's father never set a hand on him. The cycle of abuse, however, wasn't broken. David suffered mental and physical abuse from the people that were supposed to protect him. As an adult, he realizes now that his continuing mental anguish was self-inflicted. In challenging himself to see his life in a new way, David realized that the story of his childhood trauma didn't consist of what happened to him, but rather the way he responded to what happened. This realization set the stage for him to embark on a transformative journey, one that began as a terrified child, but has since included him as a mixed martial artist, the vice chairman of the Joyful Child Foundation, as an advocate for children's rights nationwide, and he, David himself, has built 2 successful international companies. He lives on a Southern California ranch-style home with his wife of 20 years and 3 children. David, again, thanks so much for taking the time to do this. I was reading your book, and I don't read every book that's sent to me. Obviously, there are a lot of books, but this one was like, so intense, but like a flaming, arrow through the heart, man. So as a way of an introduction, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Guy. I'm like I said, I'm a huge fan, and I'm so happy to be here. And I hope I can at least help one person out there that has a similar type of story.
Yeah. So let's start off with a quote here. I know you have something you want to share to kind of set the stage. What do you want to share with our audience?
Well, I've had a very good life. I have a beautiful life. I've been married for 20 years. I live on a beautiful property with a lot of animals, and I have 3 healthy kids that are very successful and all in private schools, all 3 teenagers. And so that can be very challenging. But my goal was to raise happy, healthy kids. So, I never talked about my past. I never discussed it with my wife. She had never seen me cry in 15 years.
Wow.
It was just something I never talked about. And as I was looking around at my own children and how happy and healthy they were, and obviously they deal with their struggles and challenges, but I started looking a little bit back at my own past and thinking, I think it's a story I need to tell. I grew up in a family that, my father was an alcoholic. He was a grifter, if you know what that is. That's somebody who really doesn't have a job and goes around and talks people out of their money. And so we probably lived in about 22 different homes growing up. Sometimes it was seedy motel rooms, and I was very ashamed. I was always very ashamed of it, and so I kept my past very, very quiet. And then my father was put in prison for quite a long time. When I was a 10-year-old boy, I just didn't know, where he went. My mother never told us. And so it was quite frightening growing up. There were just no boundaries. My mother refused to get a job, and so we were kind of living off other people's monies, or with the help of relatives or friends, or pretty much sometimes begging on the street. And so within that framework, like I said, there's no boundaries. So it opened the door to a tremendous amount of abuse from a lot of different people. And I put examples of different types of abuse. I picked predominantly 3 different types that happened with me, and the trauma that resulted throughout my life, and really kind of solidified itself and put me into a breakdown in my early 40s. And really what triggered that was looking at my own children and seeing how healthy they were and how happy they were. And looking at them, it really dawned on me that I had to look back at my own childhood and come to terms with it.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there's so many questions I want to get to. I do want to give you the opportunity to share your quote. I think it was a Winston Churchill quote.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Let's dig into that.
Well, I put that in the front of my book because I wanted to, by writing the book, I really wanted to inspire every child, woman and child that has been, physically and sexually abused or mentally abused, that there is hope for them. I'm not a doctor, but I see myself as kind of a professional survivor. And so the quote that I use in the front of my book was a quote by Winston Churchill that says, "Continuous effort, not strength or intelligence, is the key to unlocking our potential. Never give in, never in nothing. Never yield to force, never yield to the apparently overwhelming might of the enemy." Winston Churchill. Mm-hmm. And how I apply that quote to my life and my growth and my healing is that when you make the decision that you've had childhood trauma and you want to get better, it's going to be a very large mountain to climb, and you have to take the first step, and it's going to be a long fight. But is it worth it? Yes. It absolutely is, and I think I'm living proof of that. And so that quote has driven me in my life to be have a successful marriage and have 3 successful teenage kids. I have two sons and 1 daughter.
So you were going through this experience of your life. You talked about your father, and then the abuse from different angles that happened to you. At what point was there a point where you were getting any help of any kind?
Yeah, I wasn't. I didn't seek out the help of any professionals. The interesting thing is, as when you are a child and you're born into a family, I actually have a chapter on it that, children are empty canvases. And so you only know the environment that you were brought up in. And that being the case, believe it or not, Guy, I as much as the mental neglect, physical abuse, sexual abuse that took place, when you're a child, you unless somebody tells you, you don't know anything's wrong. And so it really took becoming an adult and backing off and seeing, like I said, the health of my children and realizing that, I had to take a look at what happened within my childhood.
So you said you were 40 when things started to shift for you, or let's talk about that period.
One of the big inspirations is my wife started getting involved in charity work. We wanted to start giving back to the community because I'd started 2 international companies. My first one, I grew for 10 years, and then I started another one. And we realized we had to start giving back to the community. And so she got involved with a very new organization, which was called the Joyful Child Foundation, which was started, I think, 2 years before by Aaron Runyon, whose daughter Samantha Runyon at 5 years old was taken and molested and murdered. It was very big news 16 years ago. Samantha would be, I think, 16 years old today.
So this was without your wife didn't know anything about your past?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct. And she just gravitated into that.
Wow.
And she worked for years with it, and won an award with them for Volunteer of the Year.
Wow.
And one day when we got to be very good friends with Aaron and Kenneth, Samantha's parents, who started the organization, and we went out to lunch, and they talked me into being on the board. And after 4 hours, and what I realized was the foundation was in a lot of trouble, just from infrastructure standpoint, the people on the board, the people running it, and they really didn't have a direction. And I met with them and several times and was very confused and realized I don't have anything to offer, but maybe one of the things I can offer is that I am an entrepreneur, and I do know how to take things from nothing and grow them into something larger. And so today we're so excited because we're absolutely exploding. Part of that is because of what's happening on the news media with bullying and sexual abuse. And last year, I believe we trained 25,000 kids, K through 12, within the school districts. 10 days of training, 2 hours a day, a program that teaches them how to protect themselves. And our ultimate goal is to have this federal legislation passed by the president or through Congress to have this implemented in every school in America.
Wow.
So that these... So what we're seeing in the media right now, people, women and children understand their boundaries and don't have to deal with this. So that inspired me to talking to Aaron to write down my story. And so that's what really inspired me to write a book.
So how were you able to contain, you said you weren't, you didn't get help, quote unquote, professional help when you were younger. How did you go about managing? I mean, it sounds like you were really successful, right? Quote unquote. Again, I mean, yeah.
Yes, Guy. What? That's a really good question. And so my way of coping was that I had a hobby on the side, and that hobby was MMA, martial arts, and so I brown belts.
Kicking ass, basically.
Yes, brown belts, black belts, and so what I would do is I would spend a full day at work, and I would go to a place I term in the book as the Lion's Den, and it was a place where a lot of amateur and professional fighters got together and trained, and we would fight and beat each other up on a weekly basis. And so it was a very strange life, being a successful entrepreneur, coming home, and my wife had cocktails, and I'd walk in, and one of her friends' martini glasses would drop because I had a broken nose and there was blood all over my face. Mm-hmm. But basically that was my therapy. Trauma survivors have a very difficult time being in the present moment. And the moments that I was fighting, though I was terrified when I was fighting, immediately when I was punched or I threw a punch, it was like an ecstasy to be tapped into the now, into the moment. Because usually I was playing over and over my childhood abuse in my mind, or I was thinking about the future of how to protect myself. As you know, trauma victims were hypervigilant people. And so that fighting was my therapy.
Wow. I mean, there's, it's, when I read your book, it immediately brought me back to an experience I had when I was working for the county. I'm in Northern California, and I was working at this facility where we kind of assessed and treated kids who were showing early signs of psychosis. Most of whom had experienced trauma, and part of the job was getting these calls from teachers, parents, therapists, whatever, talking about their kids. And inevitably, you run down the list of what's going on, and there's always trauma. There's always, for the most part, there's abuse. And I just got to this point, it's like, what is going on? What is going on? And your book is, I can't imagine the courage it took to put all that down. To me, it just seems so damn courageous.
Oh, thank you, Guy. I guess, it's interesting you say that, because, many people, my friends, employees, I guess from the general public standpoint, I would be seen as a highly successful man. I guess I'd be seen as an alpha male. And so to write it down, it took a tremendous amount of time and a lot of courage. I really, I'm not tooting my horn, but, to get it down was very, very difficult process. In fact, I spent 2 years actually editing it. And part of that was during that time, I had to go seek therapy from a therapist, Dr. Stephen Alkus, who's a wonderful therapist. And he worked with me in trying to get around the idea of exposing myself to the public in this way, to say that, yes, I was abused, I was neglected, I was hurt. And one of my biggest fears was for my children to someday read the book. And so, yes, it was an absolutely terrifying process. I'm still scared.
How did it, or has it? How has it impacted your relationship with your wife and your kids?
That's a great question. I think it's still an ongoing process. I did I did have some wonderful daddy-daughter time. Me and my 16-year-old daughter went out to lunch one day, and my wife said, you should probably tell her about the book, because at some point she will see it, and I will have to have that discussion with my two sons, who are younger. And as we were having lunch, I said, Chloe, there's something Dad wants to tell you, and we have a wonderful life. You're a beautiful little girl. You're happy. You're healthy. But just so you know, I had a very difficult childhood, and my goal in life now is to go out and help people, to help trauma survivors, especially kids with childhood trauma. And I said, there's a message that needs to be given to the world, and that message is that nobody has the right to hurt a child. And so I wrote down my story, but my story's difficult to read, and if you'd like to, you can read it at some point, but I preferred you waited until maybe you were over 21. And, and she's in her own world and happy, and she listened to me. She looked me in the eye and she understood. And her response was, "I'm so proud of you, Dad. If you can help other people and you can help other kids, you did the right thing." And then what was interesting is the next thing she said was, "Hey, after this, let's go get an ice cream." The discussion was over. What I realized in that moment, I immediately called my therapist. I called some wonderful people that are in the trauma world, trauma therapy world, and I let them know her response, and they said, "My God, Dave, she's a healthy, happy girl. It's you and your wife did a good job." And I realized that at that moment that we could turn a really kind of what looks like a negative thing into a wonderfully positive thing. And so it was a difficult process, and I still have to get to my other two sons, but I think it's going to have a positive effect on our lives.
Well, what a beautiful little story. That's so awesome. You're just to share that with your young girl. What's it been like for you? You know, I'm thinking now about the listeners of this podcast that are therapists or therapists who with experience who are maybe just starting to learn about trauma care, trauma treatment. Survivors listen to this podcast. Parents. What has it been like for you? You know, you've spent a lot of your life kind of managing or addressing your past in certain ways. Now it seems like you're doing it in a what could you say, a more intentional way or different way? How has that shift affected you and impacted you?
Gosh, Guy, let's see. Well, you know, after when I did have a breakdown in my 40s, and when I did, and I was getting involved in the Joyful Child Foundation. Well, you know, when I started looking at my own children, when they started getting older, I saw how happy and healthy they were. And I guess the pressures of life started hitting, and I decided to really look back on my childhood. I did have somewhat of a nervous breakdown, and that's when I actually did go to seek some therapy and deal with my trauma. But you know, writing down the story during that time, I guess it was probably an 8-year period, and you know, reading all the books I can, taking all the information I can, talking to as many people as I could, attending seminars. I worked with Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who performed EMDR on me. And, you know, after doing that, in the process of writing the book, when the book was finally finished, I kind of the shift from the healing process and then going out with the intention of wanting to help other people and encourage them to, especially women and children, to protect themselves and then deal with their trauma. It feels very empowering. It really does. It's a wonderful thing to be able to have worked so hard to feel healed and then to give back. And I think I wrote something about that towards the last chapters of my book, where there's, in the healing process, you know, part of healing is, you know, that continuous effort, like the Winston Churchill quote, but then also setting boundaries with people. But the final thing is you have to give back, and not just for other people and other trauma survivors, but also it for yourself. It's something that will you know, healing is it's an ongoing process. So it's in order to facilitate that process of being healed, it's important for me to go out and help other people.
Mm-hmm. Were there, or are there qualities or aspects or things, for lack of a better word, that you feel, you know, the listeners, maybe the therapists or the counselors, social workers, whomever who are listening, need to take to heart? You know, yeah.
Yes, I was very, very fortunate that, you know, the first therapist I found was, like I said, Dr. Stephen Alkus, and he's a cognitive behavioral therapist, and he gave me a very safe space to work out of, and and that was where I really had the chapter about boundaries, and they really have to, I would think, create that safe space and build a trust. And I know we're all eager to go out and you know, heal people right away, and our intentions are wonderful, but it really takes being in that safe space, listening, understanding, and giving it time. And so I do know with trauma victims that it can be a very, very difficult and long process. So we get triggered very easily. You have very hyper-vigilant people within the boundaries of your room. And it's a slippery slope. It's like walking on eggshells, I would imagine, for a new therapist going in there and, not knowing what might trigger this woman who has been abused. I have certain mental triggers and I have physical triggers, and somebody with very good intention could come and put their hand on my shoulder, and if they touch the left side of my neck, that's a trigger for me, and I could jump through the roof and not come back for a month. So the therapists are so well intentioned and doing such a great job, but I would just say that, be very patient. It takes time.
It takes time, and you say create a safe space. What did that mean for you? How did you know? How did you feel? When did you feel it was a safe space for you?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I believe I've been working with him for at least 15 years now. And after 15 years, we started doing this little exercise just a couple of weeks ago, where he said, "Dave, I'm going to try this exercise." He goes, "I would like to crack the door open about 6 inches as we're talking here. And I want to know, from a 1 to 10 scale, how does that make you feel?" Because he knows that I am hypersensitive to what's around me. I'm always ready to jump like an animal at any thing that might hurt me or some injustice out there. And he said, so he broke the door open. He said, "What's on a scale of 1 to 10? What's your fear level?" I said, I'm at a 7. I'd prefer if you close the door. And so it's been this thing back and forth where, after 15 years, he's just starting to open the door a little bit so that I can be heard, which is a wonderful metaphor for me opening the door to my story to the world. And it hasn't quite opened to a foot yet, but we're working on that, guy.
Wow. And it's awesome. It's awesome. I just love talking to you. It's just to hear everything you've gone through and how you're, dealing with this whole, with your life and with your kids and your family it's inspiring.
Oh, thank you so much, Guy.
It really is.
Like I said, I'm a huge fan. You're doing some fantastic work, and I'm so excited to be with you here.
Well, I appreciate that. So let's talk about any books or a book you want to recommend to our listeners, trauma related or not. Yeah,
absolutely. One of the books that really helped me, and I think is just, it was when my therapist first gave it to me. Me being a kind of what looks like an alpha male tough guy, he gave me this book called, The Courage to Heal, and I was like, Steve, this book is for women. But as I read through, I was like, it has wonderful stories of different women in different situations that have gone through mental, physical, and sexual abuse, and it was so helpful hearing their stories, knowing that people had stories like me out there, that and the realization that, my gosh, from this book I realized 1 in 3 women is sexually abused before the age of 18. 1 in 6 men is sexually abused before the age of 18. If this was a disease, the CDC would put the country into 1/5 of the country into triage. And so people need to start speaking up. And so The Courage to Heal was just a wonderful starting point for me. Another book I would recommend is, because with my trauma came a lot of terrible obsessive compulsive disorder. OCD for me was personally a very difficult thing to deal with, but it really helped me in the business world to get things right. And I think that helped me to become successful. But one of the wonderful OCD books, it's kind of a OCD and trauma for dummies, is a book called Brain Lock by Jeffrey Schwartz. And so that was incredibly helpful. And I do have to mention, as a third book, my good friend, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, whose book came out, I think, last year, called The Body Keeps the Score.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a wonderful book. And I think Bessel really had the intention of reaching out to more the public. I know his last books have been very much for the psychotherapy world. And so I'm so happy for Bessel that his book has been successful. When I worked with Bessel, he did say he was going to possibly have our session in the book, and that wasn't in there, so I was very disappointed, but I love Bessel to death.
So, all right, we got The Courage to Heal by Ellen Bass and Laura Davis, yes. Number 1, Brain Lock, number 2,
Jeffrey Schwartz, yes.
Jeffrey Schwartz, and then The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. Yes. Everything here that we're talking about will be listed up at the show notes page at thetraumatherapistpodcast.com. So what's next for you, David? You're on a mission?
I'm absolutely on a mission. I am on a mission along with the Joyful Child Foundation and Erin Runyon, who's coming out with her book probably in the next 6 months, to get federal legislation passed so that every child can be trained in America in every school, K through 12, so that we can end child abuse in this country. And then we'll work on the rest of the world. But that is our goal. And we finally have the template to do that. We have implemented the BRAVE program over 12 years. We've had teachers, doctors, people in many, many fields look at it, and it is now working, and there's a huge demand for it. Like I said, we trained over 25,000 children last year. I'm vice chair of the Joyful Child Foundation, and it looks like we might be signing a deal with Boys and Girls Club, which is very, very exciting right now. And I think when I wrote this book, Guy, I really thought it would just kind of go into obscurity. And now that I have a lot of people very interested in it, I think because of the Me Too movement right now. Mm-hmm. And it's wonderful to see this happening in our lifetimes. I think we're going to look back at this time 100 years from now, and it's going to be like Rosa Parks on the bus. She said no, and it's time for all of us to say no to anything that causes childhood trauma. No. So I'm very excited about the book and its release coming up, which should be in the next 6 months. I can get a copy to people. They email me through americantrauma@gmail.com. And we are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and that'd be at Facebook at America's Silent War.
Okay. Again, I'll have all those linked up at the show notes page. David, thank you so much, man, for taking the time to do this. It was a pleasure meeting you and talking with you, and it's so inspiring. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Guy. I'm a big fan, and thank you so much for having me.
All right, man. Take care.